In this video, you'll see me build a dining table, and the emphasis of this video will be the cost breakdown. I'll show you exactly how much everything costs, and a bit later in the video how much I charge for this table. So, if you have an opinion as to whether I should have charged more, less, or what this table would sell for in your area, let me know your thoughts or opinions in the comments, because honestly, it's a great source of feedback for me. Alright, so this entire table will be made from red oak, and I'll actually try to make this look like white oak, which we'll see a little later in the video. But for now, what you are seeing is basically just the breakdown of all the rough sawn lumber into what will become the apron and upper supports of the table frame. So I'm using 6/4 inch red oak, which I paid $5 a board foot for. And thankfully I have the means of milling up all this rough sawn lumber myself, so that'll save me a little money in the long run. Now, as I'm milling up these boards, rather than tell you how much each individual board costs, I'll just put a running total of how many board feet I'm using for each component of this table down at the bottom of the screen. At this point in my woodworking career, I've milled up boards hundreds of times, but it always blows my mind how big of a difference lumber looks before and after it's milled up. So as I go about building this table, you might be wondering why I decided to make this video about the financial aspects of building this table rather than just showing how to build this table or more of a DIY style video. The first reason for that is because this design is by far the most requested design that I get for a commissioned dining table, and also I feel like this design is very relatable in the sense that if you have some basic woodworking tools, you could do this table. This doesn't require a whole lot of fancy equipment, although the bigger tools definitely do help. The company is not a sponsor of this video, but these red oak legs are from Osborne Wood Products, and they are fantastic. Now, while the argument that these legs are very expensive could be made, the time saved and the quality of the end result from the table that I will be able to achieve using these legs is worth the price in my opinion. That said, the legs, however, are by far the biggest expense of this table, and if I were to make these on the lathe myself, I would save a ton of money, but I definitely don't have the skills to come up with this quality of legs on the lathe, at least not yet anyway. Now, the second reason that I'm focusing on financials for this video is because, in addition to building tables like this, I'm also trying to build a business. I would be a liar if I said that I didn't love building furniture just to build furniture, but also, whenever you're trying to build a business, you obviously have to make profit. Otherwise, that business model isn't sustainable. Now, I'm nowhere near a professional woodworker, but I'm somewhat confident in saying that I build pretty decent pieces of furniture that, for the most part, people are happy to pay money for. Now, to contradict that last statement, marketing, sales, and finding the right price point for the pieces I'm building has by far been the most difficult aspect of this entire woodworking journey for me. I am not typically a person that tries to make a lot of excuses, but I often wonder if my difficulty in selling some of these pieces for higher value or higher prices is because of where I live. And if that doesn't make any sense, well, let me try to explain. You see, I live in a small town in southern Ohio where the population is about 10,000 people. Now, it's definitely true that there's a market for things everywhere, but being limited to a smaller number of potential buyers in one area is definitely a challenge that can't be ignored. So the obvious answer to this problem is shipping, but shipping comes with its own problems as well, such as the price of shipping. And one other thing that I've learned from building a lot of pieces is that people like to see the actual piece either before they buy it or during the build process, rather than just seeing pictures of something online and hoping it shows up looking like the image or meeting expectations without ever seeing the piece in person before it gets there. So while I'm not exactly ready to pack up shop and head to the big city with hopes of making it in the woodworking field, I can't help but wonder if I lived in somewhere like Columbus, Ohio, where the population is almost 1 million people versus my hometown where the population is 10,000 people, would that yield substantially more sales and profit? And I'd like to think that the answer is yes, obviously, but I certainly feel like this problem or question is something that other woodworkers and creators can relate to as well. Alright, so lame excuses as to why I'm not selling these pieces for more aside, what have I actually done on this table so far? Depending on your skill set as a woodworker, the answer could be very complex or very simple, but in summary, all I've really done is mill some rough cut lumber and then attach that milled lumber to the legs using domino style joinery. You'll notice the tabletop seams are nearly perfect, and if you were actually paying attention to what I was doing a couple minutes ago, that's due to setting up all these tabletop boards properly and milling them in a specific order on the joiner, which yields near perfect results every single time. Small tricks like knowing how to cut proper joiner seams and also having some different tools such as my wider planer that basically allows me to pre-surface the tabletop in 2 slabs before the final glue up basically do 2 things for me. The first being obviously yielding a better end result, which means that I can charge more for this table, but also that I'll be more confident in my work. I've talked about the creator's curse in the past where if something doesn't come out perfect, it's basically flawed and worthless to me, but it's something that I'm starting to get better at, both in the aspect of just doing a good job on these projects, but also accepting the fact that a tiny mistake that honestly no one will ever notice is not the complete disaster that I like to think it is. The second thing that these tricks and tools help with is efficiency, which comes back to the subject of trying to make a profit. An up-close view of the tabletop seams, and the fact that that middle seam is really the only one that needs a lot of attention, is a prime example of being efficient in building this tabletop. Since the age-old saying time is money is true, an increase in efficiency means either I can make more money on these type of builds, or I can make money faster on these builds, depending on which way you look at it. Now at this point, other than detailing and sanding, which both cost technically nothing, the only thing left we had to do was apply the finish. Again, I'm not a professional, but up until this point, this table had been pretty easy for me to build. My main focus of this table was efficiency and doing things quickly, but as it happens oh so frequently in woodworking, just about the time you get confident, you also get a nice reality check. So up until this point, everything's gone pretty well. This is a routine table. I've made plenty of these before. This should be no problem. Now, I'm not sure what happened, but the ends of the boards on both sides of the table have cracked in a couple places. These boards had been kiln dried when I purchased them, and I've had them stored in my shop for about 2 years, so moisture shouldn't be an issue with these. And despite what I thought was this table being ready for stain and finish, unfortunately it's not, and we're going to have to fix this problem. So what I'll do is cut each end of the tabletop off, maybe 4 to 4.5 inches, and then I'll replace those ends with breadboards. My plan is to just cut enough to get rid of that crack section, and then add the breadboards on to make up for the missing length of the piece that I cut off. Not only will the breadboards help to stabilize the internal boards, but they'll also keep the tabletop flat, which is a nice benefit as well. So as much as I hate to go back and redo work, it has to happen for this table because these cracked ends are not going to suffice for the end product. And sometimes this is the reality of woodworking. These things happen. Not every build goes smoothly, and sometimes you have to fix unexpected problems. Now luckily there's no cracks within the center of the table, so the entire tabletop is good. It's just going to be on those end pieces. So with no time to waste, let's knock out these breadboards and fix this tabletop. It's certainly ironic that A big part of this table build is all about efficiency. When something unexpected happens that causes me to use a little more material than I originally planned on it, but also requires more time than I originally planned as well. The best method I've found to use to attach breadboards to tabletops is with the domino, and I know a lot of people have feelings against this, but it works well for me. In fact, I would go as far to say that I'm good at breadboards, but again, these take time. In fact, doing both breadboards takes me about 4 hours, and that's not including waiting for the tenons to dry after I glue them into the tabletop. Now, once again, the emphasis of this tabletop is about the price, but breadboards are interesting. So if you're wondering what the heck I am doing here, the tenons that you see will be used to attach the breadboard to the tabletop. Now, technically you could use screws or glue to attach these, but both of those methods will restrict wood movement, which will result in the tabletop cracking. Since we're already trying to fix a crack in the tabletop, we'll first cut mortises in both the tabletop and the breadboard, and then glue these tenons in place in the tabletop, which is basically just an extension of the tabletop. I like to put the breadboard just on the very end of each of the tenons while that glue dries to hold everything in place. The elongated slots within each of the tenons will allow for us to dowel pin the actual breadboard to the tenons, but first we'll obviously need to access those elongated slots. This is done by first marking the location of the slot, then drilling a slightly offset hole down in the breadboard, before we can finally secure everything in place with dowels. The offset which is visible in this shot will allow for the drawbar effect as we put the dowel pins in, which basically just pulls the breadboard tighter to the tabletop. This shot is a fantastic view of the drawbar effect, as that dowel first goes out but then is pulled back in. And if you are wondering, the holes are cut with a 5/16 inch drill bit, which is almost the exact same size as the 8mm cutter head used to cut those elongated slots. Okay, so now that our cracked tabletop is fixed, we can get this thing ready for putting the finish on, which will be the last expense of this table. Earlier in the video I mentioned that I'll be trying to make this red oak look like white oak, and I had several failed attempts on scrap wood, but what did work for me was to pre-treat all the surfaces with peroxide, and then I used Bona Nordic Seal for the actual finish. If you're interested in this finish, it does work well on the collar, but it is very picky and touchy to work with, so if you do use it, try it out on some sample pieces before going to your main surface. Alright, so at this point the table is basically finished, and I'll be attaching the top with Z-clips here in just a couple minutes, but those Z-clips maybe add $3 or $4 to the grand total, which at this point we've spent $1,116, and just to simplify that, we'll round it up to $1,120. So as I sand the first coat down and put the second coat of finish on, it's time to address the question, how much did I sell this table for? As I make this video and tally up the final numbers, I've certainly formed an opinion of what I sold this for, but I'll leave that out of the video and we'll just state the facts. I sold this table for $1,500. And if we do the math, 1,500 minus 1,120 gives me a profit of $380. So as I mentioned, I'll keep my opinions on that number to myself, but if you have an opinion or any thoughts on any of these numbers or anything in the video, please drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. So in summary, as this table comes together, I think one thing is clear, and that is I built a beautiful dining table and learned some lessons along the way. So while I've gained a major appreciation and understanding of the craft and art of woodworking, I think that I still have a lot to learn as far as a business standpoint goes. And that's okay, because we will fine-tune that perspective in the upcoming builds, and maybe you'll be there to help me along the way. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.